Open your Bibles with me, please, to Hebrews chapter 12. I'm sure you read it and studied it. It is a picture of something greater, which is Jesus and the law. Be satisfied and fulfill the law. Therefore, if he's in your heart, you will love the law and honor and respect the law. And that is the 10 commandments, and also the laws that he's given to the church. And it would behoove you and I to go into that study so we can know that we're compliant with what thus says the Lord for the church. Try to not be before you too long. Those are going to do not a long day. We've got some short meetings and information you want to share with you about your church, where we're going, what we're doing. And I'm sure you've heard this before, and I'd like it if somebody comes and we can preach that message again. I like that, so somebody was listening. And here in Hebrews, please read all of it when you return home, as I said. But chapter 12, verse 15, we'll do several verses, but this is what we will develop our topic from today. And he writes, as you know, the author is unknown, but the way the armory goes in the heart of the message sent by Paul is the one who wrote it. He says, looking diligently. Let me begin at verse 14. Follow peace with all men and holiness, without which no man shall see the Lord. Looking diligently, lest any man fail of the grace of God, lest any root of bitterness springing up trouble you, and thereby many be defiled. Lest there be any fornication or profane person, as Esau, who for one morsel of meat sold his birthright. I want to talk to us from verse 15, and that one little identified enemy there. Several I want to talk about the enemy within. And that is what? Bitterness. 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 These enemies lurk within. There are many of them outside. You know how it is. If you're getting ready to engage in a battle and the enemy is coming at you, taking this thing dry. You notice I got the juice and not the water. You know, if you engage in a battle and you can see the enemy, you can prepare yourself. But this enemy lurks within you. Sometimes linger there so long we forget about it. And there are three I identified, but I'm sure that many more. I just want to share these with you again today. And that is the enemy number one, bitterness. Bitterness. In 1 Peter 5:7, there's another enemy called cares. And in 2 Peter 1:5, there's another one called cowardice. And please remember, the devil is at work. He's not going to stop until he's thrown into the lake of fire. Pray for those wrongdoers who come against you. Love your enemy. Be good to those who despitefully use you. You notice if you have been in a boat and you're going upstream across the river when the water is terribly strong. Everybody is tugging on the oars, don't have time to rock the boat. For all the Christians are tugging on the spiritual oars to get the church where the Lord wanted to be. There would be no time for grumbling and complaining. So to handle yourself, use your head. To handle others, use your heart. Forgiveness is a conclusive act. It has a closure, a beginning and a closure. There's a song I like singing. Maybe I sing it sometime today or maybe next week. Lord, you know all about it. Stand by. This enemy I want to talk about today is an internal inside enemy. Job, remember 10, verse 1, he said, my soul is weary of my life. I will leave my complaint upon myself. I will speak in the bitterness of my soul. 25, he said, the wicked dieth in the bitterness of his soul, and neither earth is there any pleasure, for he can't get any satisfaction. You remember the song? I can't get no satisfaction. Bitterness will block it. In Proverbs 14:10, he says, the heart knoweth its own bitterness, and a stranger does not intermeddle with it, with his joy. In Acts 8:23, he said, the case of the sorcerer, you know the story there. He says, I perceive that thou art in the gall of bitterness, when there was an approach by what the man of God had, so you could go around and lay hands on people, that they may receive the power of the tongue. He says, I perceive that you in the heart of a gall of bitterness, and is in the bond of iniquity. And Simon, instead of the man praying for what he wanted, Simon told him, you were trying to pay for what you want. I'm talking about the enemy within. Let us remember, no life ever grows great until it is focused, dedicated, and disciplined. It cannot grow great unless those three things are involved. Well, there are three powerful evils and which work from within us to hinder our spiritual growth and to hinder our progress. And it's my intention today to point out and concentrate on just one, and maybe I'll be able to handle all three, and talk about this evil briefly. These deadly evils working from within us. Bitterness. Have you ever been bitter against someone? Well, I'm already holding on to it now. But somebody said it's like buying some poison for a rat to be poisoned and die, but you eat the poison, hoping the rat will die. And you notice the word says the root of bitterness, implying something more than a passion, something more than things that are temporary. Roots indicate that bitterness goes deep into the soul, a condition deep and firmly implanted. Bitterness. Bitterness is not just an engrafted branch. Bitterness is not just a temporary seed. It's not a leaf that can put on a tree. Not easily placed here or there, but bitterness, its roots go deep on the inside, taking a firm hold. It is difficult to be rid of it. In Romans 11:16, Paul writes, he says, if the root be holy, so are the branch. Therefore we might say that if the root of bitterness is in the soul, so is the whole nature of that soul bitter. You ever had to talk to somebody and seem like all they have is a complaint about another person, about something else? But you ever notice one drop of ink in a glass of water, doesn't matter if it's just as little small, like the size of a pinhead, it discolors the whole glass. It is no longer clear. You may be able to see through it, but it's not a pure glass of water. So just so the root of bitterness, it discolors, it warps, and it influences the whole being of the individual. There are many things which causes bitterness. But the results, ladies and gentlemen, can all be classified under two headings. And the first of these things, perhaps, not maybe the greatest one, but it happens frequently, it is bitterness toward God. Bitterness toward God. God sometimes has to deal with his children in chastisement. And because of the chastisement, some children become bitter and complain against God. And because of the ignorance of the Word of God and the ignorance of the devil's action, they begin to accuse the devil and say, the devil is doing this, or the devil made me do this, or the devil is causing the problem. But our Lord could very well be chastising us with the rod and trying to drive the bitterness out of us. May not have anything at all to do with the devil, but the Lord chastening his children. A lot of times folks get to talk bitter toward God because they think he's not dealt fairly with them. And is that put more upon them than they can bear. I'm glad God didn't deal with me fairly last night or this morning. Because if I got what was my fair yes, what would I be? But his mercy and his grace administered his love toward me.
Come on.
Before I continue to ask, why did God allow this to happen to me? They cannot see sometimes that God has allowed this particular thing to happen to them for their own good and for his own glory. A lot of us have not stopped to praise God until after we walk from the doctor. He said we're going to be all right. A lot of folk don't stop to praise God until they get in trouble. And then they want to call on God. Therefore, because of their spiritual blindness, they think they have been unjustly treated by God. And then bitterness against God take root in their hearts. That's the enemy within. It's not the devil. It's bitterness. It might be a fruit of the devil. But secondly, not only bitter against God, but, and more frequently, people become bitter toward their fellow men. Someone treats them unkindly or does them an injustice, and immediately the root of bitterness springs up. There's no concentration of how can I work this out to get this person free. I need you to pray with me. Amen. This morning, this is not an easy message. The sad fact is that most people are not willing to make things right between themselves and the person who's wronged them. They say, I was treated unjustly, and the person who did it was fully aware that they treated me unjustly, and I'm not going to forgive them. And the situation cannot be made right. I heard a person say the other day, he said, it just can't be made right, Pastor. Like, you just don't know. You're on the outside looking in. You don't know what this person has done to me. I said, but you say Christ is in your heart? I know Christ. And he argued with me, and that Christ is my Savior. I said, well, how can you allow bitterness and Christ at the same time dwell in your heart? Bitterness has so distorted folk outlook on life that they cannot observe the situation in its true perspective and then deal with it according to the dictates of the Holy Spirit. They let bitterness grow until it dominates every phase of their being. And those around them even recognize bitterness in their speech. It is what they say constantly, what they do, how they talk about and argue about things and stuff. Starts out all right, but before the conversation is over, there's an argument. You know what I'm talking about. When it is suggested to such a person that they need to go to the other person and talk the matter over and be understanding about it, they'll say, it is no use. Because, Pastor, you just don't know what happened to me. I want to again say, yes, I do know. I see what's happened to you. That bitterness has stepped in there and has distorted your character. Oh. I would not believe anything. Somebody said the other day that this person said from this point forward, I would not believe anything they have to say it even if it's something good. Action speaks louder than words. I would, but I thought about it, but I know I should, but that's when I said I should be like a billy goat. Go give him a good butt. I know what can happen, but but it is sad when a person does not want to make things right with others around them. And then they attempt to justify such actions that they take. Bitterness by saying, I am only human and I have been terribly treated, mistreated, and I just can't handle this no more. I've suffered a tremendous wrong and I just cannot make it right with that person. Yes, that person is still suffering, not directly from the wrong the person did to them, but from the bitterness which they are harboring in their heart. This is kind of suffering, ladies and gentlemen, that you don't want. This is the kind of suffering that eateth at the heart like a cancer. 3 major killers: cancer, heart attack, and suffering. But bitterness is one of those things that trumps heart attacks and cancer. It's a slow killer, high blood pressure versus the suffering. Brothers and sisters, there are folk in between members of the family and church membership. It is much easier for us to overlook something somebody's done that is not a member of our family. It is easy for us to forgive and overlook something an enemy done to us that is not of the church and are not our relative. Because the hurt goes deeper when a professing Christian, a fellow churchman, or a relative, you know what I'm talking about. The enlightened people, the folk who know the truth, the folk who say Christ is in their heart. This hurt goes deeper than anything else. And the bitterness, it is there. And I can understand that, but Christ, Jesus, can make the difference. The Bible teaches us on that Christmas day, Jesus Christ, he came unto his own, and his own received him not. Another scripture says, what are these wounds in thine hands? Then he shall answer to them, these with which I was wounded in the household of my friend. Zechariah 13:6. The bitterness. The enemy within, bitterness. No, we're not perfect, but you can allow Jesus to do for you what you cannot do for yourself. Amen. Jesus can uproot the bitterness and throw it into the sea of forgetfulness. Amen. He's uprooted yours, he's uprooted mine, and there are folk who want to talk about it, but I tell them, if you want to go fishing in my sea of forgetfulness, you go home and get in it. But you know they can't get in there because God won't allow them to. Bitterness is an evil enemy. The whole trouble is that you're not willing, some folk are not willing to remove the bitterness. Some folk are bitter to the point of it's a shackle, it's a jail, it's a prison. Some folk bitter to the point that they can't see nothing but that bitterness and the person that it came from in a way, not that they should see them, but they see them as something that they just cannot live without. Some folk are keeping the grudge. Are you holding a grudge this morning? Some are weak because of grudge. Please, even if the change brought against, the charge brought against the person that you know is true, some folk get satisfaction out of being bitter toward others. But you know something? Is God, if God will hold against each one of us right now the wrong we've done, if God would allow bitterness just for a moment to be his tool of judging, right now in this room, you'd have to get somebody to preach because he'd already annihilated me. But because of his long suffering and his mercy, because he wants to perfect and help us perfect holiness, and help us rise to the point that we are the light, we are the salt of this world. He refuses to abandon us. He refuses to let that evil be anywhere seen in his sight. And how did he set it up? There is a liaison between us and the Father, an advocate. And his name is Jesus. And when Jesus is there, when the blood of Christ is looked through and God sees you and I, the stuff he should and could condemn us with right now, he no longer sees us in that fashion. So ladies and gentlemen, don't be determined to keep that grudge. It's a silent killer. Your blood pressure will rise. Your hearing will go dull. Your feelings are on the end of your skin. You can't see clearly. You can't hear what you need to hear. You'll be hearing what you want to hear. Some folk get satisfaction out of being in that state of bitterness toward others. But please hear me, if you want a long life and have it more abundantly, the Bible says, if thy brother trespass against you, don't come to Pastor Mack and tell him. Don't go to mother, father, sister, brother, husband, or wife, or friend and tell them. The Bible didn't say it. He didn't say go to the grapevine and get that person whose ears are itching and want to hear something. He says what? Go to that person alone. Amen. Between you and that person, and if the person shall hear thee. He said, then thou hast gained thy brother. Matthew chapter 18, verse 15. And it's important to do it Jesus' way. If it don't hear you, you just take another one. Get to 2, you then take 3. And if it don't hear you, then you take it before the church, which then you take it before the pastor. But he says, first of all, don't put her or his washing out on no wire because it's not clean. Deal with it. Very few are willing to do this. They will say, it will not be of any use. But have you tried? Yes, I'm just wasting my time. But have you tried it? Let me put emphasis on it. But have you tried it Jesus' way? Not your way. Not religious way, not denominational way, not your feeling way, but have you done it the way Jesus told you to do? The damage that is done now, ladies and gentlemen, cannot be repaired. That's what folks said. Maybe not. But one thing can be changed. The bitterness can be dug by the roots out and cast out of your heart and out of your life. Paul didn't say, cut it down. He is catargio. He said, dig it up. Get every root out and cast it away. Just what Jesus, if I've done another songwriter said, let Jesus fix it for you. He knows just what to do. Whenever you pray, let him have his way. And Jesus can fix it. But ladies and gentlemen, I'm not trying to pretend that it's not a hard journey. We have scars right now because of the bitterness or the pain that had been inflicted on us and therefore created the bitterness. And I know sometimes you can't rest at night. You have a good bed, very comfortable bed, but can't get no sleep. Nice chair, but can't get no rest. Plenty of food, but there is no appetite. Body's healthy enough, but you don't want to go do no exercise because the bitterness is there, draining the life out of you. But we have to dig it up. The process can come only by the grace and the power of God. You yourself, you have no power to dig it up yourself. What you're going to do when you dig it up, you're going to break off the root and plant it somewhere else in your house. All you're going to do is think about it as you dig it up. You're going to be thinking about, well, maybe should get rid of this right now. I should deal with this a little later on. And next thing you know, you're going to feed it and it start growing. But you do not have the power yourself, but the power is in you, which is Holy Spirit himself. Let Jesus fix it. If you are sincere and willing to let God do the digging, God can and will remove the bitterness from your heart. And the way he does it, he will fix it, but will not come up later on. Amen. This our God is greater than the devil. This our God that we're talking about is greater than anything you could ever imagine. And God's plan is unlimited for you. The heart of a willing person. God's plan for you who are willing for God to have his way in the long run, you who are bitter, you're suffering the greatest and the greatest loss that can possibly be imagined. You can look back over your life, and because of bitterness, you've lost so much. But restoration time is now. God is ready to fix it for you. Bitterness and hatred makes you unhappy and affects your whole life, especially your spiritual life. You have been wronged by someone. You have suffered from the deed they've done. But 1,000 times more, you're suffering from bitterness in your own heart. It is not worth it. Forgive them. Forgive them. No, don't forget them. Forgive them. Don't forget them. Forgive them. And once you forgive them, forgiveness is a conclusive action that you and I must take. And only you can do that in the power of the Lord. When you forgive them, help them get back to the position that they've fallen from, and you restore the joy of your salvation, you restore the joy of your peace, and you restore the healing in the Lord. You know, we will have love, the kind of love we must have. You are not made to linger around with this. He's ready to take it out of you. Some will say again, I'll forgive, but I won't forget. Some things you cannot forget. Because once you look at this scar, or that mark, that problem, when you lost your hair because of that person, I'm serious. You always see it, but you're going to look at it in the wrong way, in the proper way. You can't forget if somebody slapped you upside your head, cut you, mistreated you, and you're in a financial burden because they robbed you. Not with a gun, but by lies, mistreated you. That pain, that scar is there, but you'll look at it in a different way. You can't forget some things, but you can certainly get over it. You can forget it. In Him, Jesus, you can love that person. All right, somebody said, but will God fix this for me? The only way you can try, the only way you can know it is what? Turn it over to the Lord. Let Him uproot that bitterness. It's not worth it. It's not worth it. Look at what you've lost. Look at what your friends lost. You who've not been holding on to bitterness and got rid of it, why don't you want the same healing for your friends and your family? You who understood the poison and the bad attack from bitterness and you got rid of it, why don't you have this relentless pursuit of letting your friends and your family, and especially your enemy, experience this healing? That's what Jesus was talked about and what was prophesied in the 52nd chapter of Isaiah. By His stripes, you know the story, we're healed. And He was wounded for our iniquity. It simply means these kinds of things right here He can heal us from if we would just turn it over to Jesus. I'm closing. Be careful how you treat one another. The root of bitterness is an evil thing. It is a dividing thing. It divides churches. It breaks up homes. Makes children hate their mother and father. No good relationship with daughter and mama. No good relationship with father and son. Bitterness is an evil enemy. Please, let me warn some of you who have bitterness toward your fellow church member. Be sure that you have been wronged in the first place. Sometimes because we hear something or somebody brings us something, it's called, I heard it through the grapevine. Make sure before you take that stand that it is true. So you're talking about a pain, and be careful how you treat one another. I have seen so many people carrying grudges who only thought they had been treated wrongly. The way things look, they say. They had a right to be angry with other persons. But in some cases, I've known that other persons, I know the accusation that was given about that person just could not be true. You know what I'm talking about. The Bible said, do not support bearing witness, false witness against someone. Somebody bring you something you know full well she or he would not do nothing like that. You should do the inquiry. And don't take a stand with that person. You know what's wrong sometimes. The enemy within. Not drugs. Not weapons, guns, and knives. Not education. Not poverty. As sickening, as bad as racism is, it's not racism. As painful as prejudice this is, in its right or wrong position, that's not what it is. It's the enemy within that's called bitterness. Bitterness is a horrible enemy. Are you honestly and sure today and positive that someone has done you a wrong? Or maybe, ladies and gentlemen, you're just going by what you heard or what you think somebody said about you. But let me ask you this. Do you want to be sure? You should be very sure before you allow that thing to find a place in your heart. You're going to have to give an account of it one day to God. One of these days. Yes, cancer is a bad killer. Heart attacks, bad killer. But that old grapevine is a killer too. But the meanest and the most horrible killer is bitterness. In the meantime, you're letting bitterness rot yourself alive. You've seen that movie about the walking dead. People who are harboring bitterness. That's a picture of them. The walking dead. But you call Jesus right now and let Jesus fix it. Don't call the government. Don't call the law. Don't even call the pastor. But call Jesus. If you call me, I'm going to show you the path that the Lord has laid for you. If you know the path, those of you, that's the ones I'm saying don't call me, but you who do not know the path, call me 24 hours a day. But you who know the path that the Lord laid, run to Jesus. We need you. Don't let bitterness rob you of your joy. Call upon Jesus. How can we honestly kneel and pray? How can we honestly sing the songs of Zion, play on the instrument, teach the Sunday school lesson, shake hands, hug one another, knowing that forgiveness is not in our heart? How can we honestly say, I'm praising the Lord? I don't care what they feel about me. Well, whoever you're impressing at that time, you better celebrate it. Because it's not going to God. How do I know that? What did it say in Proverbs? You who regard iniquity in your heart, is I will not hear you. He's given instructions. Lay your gift to the altar, then go get that thing right and come back and then lift it up.
Hallelujah. Yes.
How can we honestly pray? How can we honestly sing, teach? How can we honestly say we love one another, but yet have not forgiven one another? Ephesians 4:32 teaches us, tells us, and be ye kind one to another. What does it say? Tender-hearted, forgiving one another. Now, these are commands, not suggestions to the church. If we don't do this, we're sinning. And if we can pray calling the Lord, say we're serving God, but have not implemented this in our lives toward one another, God's not going to hear our prayers favorably. Forgiving one another. He said, even as God, for Christ's sake, hath forgiven you. Now, what has God forgiven us for? And for, don't answer me, but pound it in your heart. When the Israelites, my mind take it back to them, and they traveled from Egypt to the promised land. They were one time suffering from the lack of water. You know the story. And when they didn't find water, they could not drink because of thirst. But they came upon water, and the water was bitter. You remember? The water was there, but they couldn't drink it. It was wet, but they couldn't drink it. People were thirsty, but they could not drink it. How true is the lives of Christians today? They show up, they're Christians, but their water is bitter. The conversation is bitter. It's what folk need, the wet water, the light, the salt, the encouragement, but you can't be used because you're bitter. But you know what the Lord told Moses? He said there was a tree over there, and it was at Mount Mara. He said, you go cut the tree down and throw it into the water, and the bitterness of the water will disappear. And once he obeyed the Lord, you know the rest of the story. The verse tells the people began, once they got the water, began to murmur and complain and cry unto the Lord. And the Lord showed him that tree. But the sweet water that they drank now, thank God for him intervening. They were able to lift up their hands and no longer complain. The person in your life that you haven't forgiven may be that tree to get rid of your bitterness. The person you don't want to speak to anymore may be that tree that the Lord will use to make you sweet again. The person who just needs a phone call from you may be that person that the Lord will use to let somebody see that he is the way, the truth, and the life. He said, why don't the Lord just go around me and use that person without me? No, the Lord wants that person to see that your faith and your testimony, your witness is not a hypocritical thing, but it's a fact that God can fix the things that are wrong in our lives. I close now. Another song says, Lord, you know all about it. Amen. Stand by me. There was another tree which God showed Moses, which represented the cross on which the Lamb of God was to die. The cross which, when applied, is sweeter than anything I've ever known. He laid on there, stretched wide, hung his head and died for you and for me. Y'all with me? Amen. That tree made you no longer bitter, but made you sweet. The cross he died on. Where are you today, young lady, young man, old lady? It does not matter how bitter. It doesn't matter how bitter one has become. I know I'm talking about me too. It doesn't matter how bitter one has become. You too can become sweet. The soul, if you would just let the tree occupy the heart of the very being of your life. There is power in the blood. Oh, the blood. I wish y'all could just sing one stanza. Oh, the blood of Jesus. What mass choir was that? I don't remember who did it, but oh, the blood of Jesus. You need joy? It's in the blood. You need peace? It's in the blood. You need forgiveness? It's in the blood. You need restoration, reconciliation? It's in the blood. It happened with that tree. That bitterness is there. Grab the hold of your life. The very words you heard from the scripture, from the text, from the sermon, causing the roots to lose its strength and its density. Let it go. The conviction of Holy Spirit speaking to you, moving you. He's wanting you to be restored to the way God wants you to be, so that you can have an effect proper this Christmas, this day, on those in your life. Oh, the blood. Bitterness, that silent, powerful killer. Oh, you can get rid of it right now. Jesus shed his blood for you. You can do it right now, ladies and gentlemen. He'll take care of the internal, I-N-T-E-R-N-A-L, by rooting it out and making the power of his presence in you by way of his spirit be the guard against the doors whereby bitterness will not come in anymore. And then there's another called eternal sanctification. He's already fixed that for you. Your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life. You don't have to worry about that. That inside, what's going on right now? If you allow those two to take place and activated by the Holy Spirit, then the X-E-X-T-E-R-N-A-L, your environment will be sanctified. He's already positionally have you in heaven. Nothing can remove that. That's E-T-E-R-N-A-L. Bitterness has no place. It's too much of a burden. Internally, knocking Jesus is for you to open up. Nobody can do that but you. Again, in your environment, external.